Thank you very much for coming here today and to show respect for our cause and for many of our remarkable speakers. And my congratulations to Thor and his magnificent team for putting together another spectacular event. I asked to put this map behind me. Many of you saw this map in the hall. It's the map about human rights. Actually, more about human rights abuses and violations. And it looks quite red now. Actually, it's probably even worse than you could see here, because in some countries we have this, it's invisible red spots, coming up to the surface. And just remember, 25 years ago, Soviet Union has collapsed. And many of us, not only in the former Soviet Union, but around the world, believed that was the end of history. I mean, in positive terms, not apocalypse. And best-selling book of Francis Fukuyama, The End of History, reflected these expectations, that the rest would be, as we say in chess, technical win. Liberal democracies will march incessantly around the world to final victory. But what have we learned over these years is that the evil doesn't die, it doesn't disappear. It could be buried under the rubbles of Berlin Wall for a while. But if we lose our vigilance, it sprouts out. So years and years of complacency, what I would call, a seasonal cycle of complacency. That's why I called my latest book, The Winter is Coming. It's first to refer, to these cycles in history and somehow to debate with this Fukuyama's end of history concept. Though I have to admit I shared these expectations in 91, 92. But it's also to warn us about what's coming out. Many people I saw here today just said, they read the book and, the warning was delayed because winter is here. Not in, of course, in this town, but again, looking at this map, we understand that something went wrong. And I guess, that's one of the lessons is that we have to keep fighting for freedom. And we have to understand that loss of freedom elsewhere eventually affects us. We live in a world that is sort of interdependent. It's all interwoven. And if we think that, the loss of freedom, the abuse of human rights, the rise of dictatorship elsewhere, whether it's Russia, country as big as Russia, or a smaller one, you name it, North Korea, or, you name it, Ecuador, doesn't affect us, we're wrong. Because, it adds up to a critical mass. And at one point, we could see the effect. The effect, that concerns our lives. Dictators, they don't ask why. They always ask why not. And unfortunately, we could see, that over years, many deals have been made with the worst regimes, worst dictatorial regimes in the world. And each of these deals have not only conceded lives and territories, but also gave up the ground of moral values, the moral values that won the Cold War. And now we are looking at this map and we just understand that, the red is spreading not accidentally. And the red is, is on the rise. As I said, we still see a lot of green there, but if you start looking at the political composition in many European countries, you will see that, it has a very strong red component. And when I say red, I mean all the forces that are denying the values that are so dear for all of us in this hall. It could be radical left, it could be ultranationalist. Let's not forget, Nazis also fought under red flag. What pains me that, there were many warnings. If I talk about my own country, Russia, about dangers that Putin could represent eventually to the rest of the world. That's what we have been saying for years, that every dictator in the beginning needs friends. But eventually, when he's entrenched, when he's in power, when his cronies control everything, he goes after all the enemies inside the country, and when he's done, he goes beyond national borders. That's what happened. Nobody wanted to listen. Everyone wanted to enjoy life, to celebrate, and to find sort of a common ground, to compromise. No, there are no compromises. And impunity is a common disease for dictators. If nothing, threatens their holding power, so why to stop? Because eventually they will have to create another conflict. This is what, makes this world, more dangerous than ever before, because we all have access to the same technology. Again, it's good and bad. It enables us to do great things. It helps us to create new ventures, to promote business, financial transactions, social, cultural ties. But it also helps other guys, bad guys, to promote terrorism and the vicious propaganda, poisonous propaganda. And we have to admit that they are quite capable of doing it. Because for us, this fight seems like something, again, remoted. Here we are, we can enjoy life, and it's something that happens elsewhere. For them, it's a matter of survival. They know that if they stop fighting or creating enemies, real or artificial, they will lose the purpose. They will no longer stay in power since people will start asking questions about social security, healthcare, and about, human conditions that everybody wants to receive, from any government. So that's why perpetuating the culture of hatred and violence and aggression, it eventually becomes paramount for any dictatorial and terrorist regime around the world. And just a couple of days ago, the day before yesterday, we saw the report of the international group that spent almost 2 years investigating the crime of killing 298 passengers of Malaysian MH17, Malaysian Boeing. We all knew what would be the conclusion. So it's clearly, it was a crime committed by Putin's cronies, and most likely the order to shoot down came from the very top of Moscow. And I don't understand, that it took so long, and we could see that Western institutions have been gradually but steadily coming to this conclusion, though it still remains to be seen how they're going to prosecute those responsible for this heinous crime. 298 citizens, 198 Dutch citizens in that plane. I guess it's more victims, Dutch victims, in one moment since World War II. But I guess this number is being killed in Syria on an hourly basis. And it seems that the world is, I wouldn't say indifferent, but accepts it as something inevitable. So what can we do? And we have been watching as Putin's very efficient military machine has been slaughtering innocent civilians, helping butcherous regime of Bashar al-Assad to stay in power. So there's still no political will in the free world to confront dictators and to call them who they are and to come up with a comprehensive strategy, the one that helped us to stop communism and to defeat communism eventually in the last century. And as I said, what has been happening in Syria has an effect. Because these Syrian refugees escaping from Assad's regime, from ISIS, from all other terrorist and dictatorial groups in the region, they're running elsewhere, mainly to Europe. And by arriving in Europe, they create political tension. And who benefits from this tension? Vladimir Putin's buddies, whether they come from the left or the right. Those who are aiming at destroying European Union and institutions that protect democracy and human rights on the continent. So that's another effect. And we could see the rise of very dangerous populists elsewhere, including this country. It's not accidental. It's a very much a result of spread of this red on this map. And again, as I said, don't be mistaken by so much green. Many countries could turn red very soon, because again, it's a trend. It's very difficult to stop the train that is moving in this direction. And the philosophy that if we don't, if we let them do whatever they can, whatever the crimes are committed by them elsewhere in their countries, they will not touch us. Wrong. They will intervene. And we could see already, an attempts to intervene even in the US elections. Because again, it's a small world. The world is getting smaller. And unless we put up a good fight, the fight wars of values that we are defending, we will be on the losing side. And it's no one else, who can help us. I don't think we can outsource this fight to the elected officials. It depends very much on us, how effectively we oppose them, how we rally public opinion to understand that the values that we're defending, the values of human life, the human rights in general, they are universal. And fighting dictatorships is absolutely necessary if we want to go after the source of evil. Fighting against the reasons, as Thor explained this morning, that is, we look at poverty, clean water, and many other things that could be resolved if we have more democracy on the planet. And just to wrap up my presentation, I always want to look at the day in history. And today, September 29th, actually a day that could teach us a lot. What happens if we try to appease dictators and to find sort of an easy way out, avoid a battle that is imminent? On September 29, 1938, everybody can recall the date, Britain and France conceded to Germany, to Hitler, Sudetenland, and basically, paved the way for Nazi aggression in Eastern Europe. They thought that, it would be somewhere else. According to Chamberlain, so we would not fight for the country that nobody could find on the map. We know what's happened 2 years later when German bombs were dropped on London and other British cities, and how many people died because of this decision. But it's even more of a tragic coincidence. On the same day, September 29, 1941, Nazis aggressors committed one of the most heinous crimes in Kiev, Babi Yar, for 2 days, 29 and 30s. The same 2 days, 3 years ago, France and Britain negotiated with Hitler, quote unquote, negotiated. Nazis killed 32,000 Jews, the largest probably one of execution during World War II. Set aside Auschwitz and concentration camps. So that's how history tells us that showing weakness to the dictators, ducking the fight, leads to horrible consequences. I don't want to find excuses for those politicians who just who made no efforts to stop World War II. Actually, they made efforts because they believed they could make these concessions. The difference between them and politicians today, and the difference between people who lived then and us, they didn't have in the 30s the books to read. They didn't know what would follow. We do. We don't have such an excuse. And unless we decide to fight, unless we realize that no one else here is to help us, but to get together and to secure what is the very foundation of the free world, nothing will happen. So I wish, I could end up this presentation with a more optimistic note. But, the good thing that winter is not forever. I'm also a big fan of the books and the TV show. And one of the reasons I thought the title of the book would be appropriate, referring to George Martin's books, is that the winter that is coming on the TV screen in the Westeros, this winter is not just about the climate. It's a winter that is brought by evil. And the duration of this winter depends on ability of good people to defend our values. Same is now. The duration of this winter, the duration of the Red attack depends very much on our ability to fight back. And I believe that we'll win as we won the Cold War and many other battles before. Thank you.